Yes, I came up with my own little thing that has been floating around Twitter sphere and other areas. This is a book called Ruth Montgomery Writes Again. I'd like to know your opinion of it. Basically, I'll read out the blurb. The human race is at a critical juncture. Famed author and spiritualist Ruth Montgomery and her spirit guides are communicating from the other side with crucial information that can help humanity save itself from destruction. Since 2002, the members of the Macoba family have been involved in the most amazing experience of their lives, receiving communications via automatic writing transmissions from the spirit of the late award-winning journalist Ruth Montgomery. These transmissions occur when the energy of a departed spirit enters the body and moves the pen in the hand across the paper on its own. So basically what we've got here is dead people writing books via spirit writing.
There's a fine tradition in that line, young man.
Yes,
Yeah,
is there really?
Ever since the kind of the very birth of spiritualism, which was kind of 1848 in Hydesville in New York State, where the Fox sisters reported, these two young girls reported that they could hear these strange rapping sounds, and they worked out that this was actually a spirit, and they could communicate with the spirit, not once but yes, not twice but no, that kind of thing. And this generated a huge amount of interest initially in the local neighbourhood. People would come round and see this. The girl's mother was scared out of her wits. Their elder sister realised this was actually quite a good way of making money, and she kind of took this as far as it would go. The whole thing then spread. Other people found that they could also produce these weird effects, and basically seances became more and more elaborate. One of the things that happened was that people realised that if you worked out a code, you could actually have whole books dictated from the other side. Now, this was a very laborious process, because this code would be, if you wanted the 22nd letter of the alphabet, this was 22 raps, and then you'd try to write down that one letter, and then go on to the next letter. But people did it. They spent all this time, produced these books. Spiritualism just took off like wildfire, spread it all around the world, certainly all across America and Europe. And it caused great excitement at the time. People really, really took this seriously. There were always skeptics. There were always people who didn't believe the Fox sisters. But it wasn't actually until 40 years later, in 1888, this was just a few years after the Society for Psychical Research was founded, that these girls, they basically confessed that the whole thing had been just a schoolgirl prank. And the way they made their noises, they used various techniques, but one of them was that they had this strange ability to make loud cracking noises from their joints. And and as I say, but this obviously, taking this back, the spiritist movement was up and running and so powerful by then that nothing was going to stop it. One of the interesting things about automatic writing is, on the one hand, it might be discarnate spirits that are somehow possessing a person and causing them to write these messages, or it might be that the people are writing the messages themselves, even if they're not consciously aware of it. And there are a whole host of other phenomena that are similar. There's kind of the Ouija board, for example. There's dowsing. There are various other phenomena, I'd say, which I won't go into. But the obvious counter-explanation is that either these people are deliberately faking it, I suspect they're not, or that they are actually moving the pen or pencil but without realising they're doing it. Now, the evidence that is probably the correct explanation is fairly strong, to say the least. One of the crazes that took off when spiritualism was in its heyday was something called table tilting, where typically people would stand around a small, round, fairly light table. They'd put their hands on the table and they'd address questions to the spirits. And if it was a good session, the table would kind of judder and then maybe really start to move. And on a really good session, they could end up kind of chasing around the room, trying to keep their hands in contact with this table that was apparently being pushed around by the spirits.
Yeah.
I'm
just saying, I kind of hope I've got better things to do if I become a spirit. But,
Yeah, well, some of the messages they bring back are fairly profound as well. It kind of, we're all very happy. But one of the interesting things about this episode was that it was one of the first to attract the attention of any kind of serious scientist. It was Michael Faraday in this case. And he was intrigued by this and very open-minded about it. And he wanted to test two possibilities here. Either the there's some external force, possibly a spirit, is moving the table, or people are moving the table without realising it. And he did a series of really ingenious experiments, and I'll just describe one of them. Rather than getting people to put their hands directly on the table, he put layers of waxed paper on the table, and they put their hands on top of that. Now, once the session started, let's say the table moved to the right. If this was being moved by an external force, then people's hands would tend to drag behind it. So the wax paper would be spread out to the left. Right. If people were pushing the table, even without, albeit not realising it, not consciously aware of it, then the table would be tending to drag behind the hands, and so you get the opposite pattern. And needless to say, you can imagine what Faraday found. Yes. But again, it's a nice example of somebody taking a proper, open-minded, experimental approach and drawing a very clear conclusion. It's what we call the ideomotor effect, when there's a suggestion or an expectation of movement of a particular kind, and actually it is the person who is supplying the muscular energy, but without any conscious awareness that they're doing it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, plugging time.
Woohoo!
What have you got?
Right. I mean, for any listeners who are kind of into all this stuff, I think it's probably worth checking out our website, which is www.goldsmiths.ac.uk/APRU, which is obviously for Anomalistic Psychology Research Unit. And there's lots of stuff there. You can download some of our publications, for example. There's also details of our invited speaker programme, which not every Tuesday, but on some Tuesdays we have invited speakers on Tuesday evenings. We had one last night. We had a very interesting talk from Simon Dean about a particular religious group and how they reacted when their leader died, and those who thought that he really was dead and those that thought he wasn't, and so on. Next week we've got Daniela Rudloff from the Department of Psychology at the University of Leicester on mental shortcuts, the good, the bad and the ugly. And we've got a whole range of other interesting speakers lined up for the rest of this term and for next term. But if you go there, you can find the speaker list. I'd also recommend that if you are interested in coming on for talks, which are free, there's no need to book, and they're open to the public. If you do want to come along, I would recommend that you subscribe to the Psychology of the Paranormal email list. Again, it's free, and it's just a way of allowing me to tell people about these events and other events that they might be interested in. It's not a discussion list, so we won't clog up your inbox. Another possible alternative is for notices which I have to get out very quickly, then Twitter is obviously good. I mean, my Twitter name is Chris C. French, all one word. So people might want to kind of have a look at that. What else have we got on our website? We just basically talk more about anomalistic psychology generally. There's details of some of the experiments that people can take part in. If they want to take part in our studies, then we're always interested in that. Another website I want to plug is the Skeptic website for the Skeptic magazine, which I edit, and that is www.skeptic.org.uk, and there are various links there. There's lots of stuff to explore. But obviously, the magazine, I'm going to give that a plug. We've been going now for over 20 years. We have a special offer on for new subscribers at the moment, so that if people go to the website, they can find details of that. It's basically, rather than paying £20 for a year's subscription, which is 4 issues, you can get a subscription for £15. Bigger discounts for longer term commitments, etc. And we've also, as I say, because we've been going for over 20 years, we've recently produced a Best of the Skeptic volume. This is edited by myself and Wendy Grossman, who was the magazine's founder. The book's called Why Statues Weep, and it's basically, as I say, a collection of the best of the articles from the last 20 odd years of a skeptic. And again, that's available. There's a link from the website, and you can get a discount on that when you go to the publisher's website. If you type in the code skeptic with a K, you'll get 10% off the price, which is £13. That knocks it down to £11.70. think that's it in
That's
terms of the
subtle,
adverts. I think, yeah, that's subliminal kind of advertising
Yeah,
there
subtle.
almost. It was so subtle, wasn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
no one could notice.
Exactly.
Slipped it. Okay, being as this is the first week and people are going to want to get used to this room, I'm going to end about 5 minutes early. Sorry, people. But I'm going to end by asking you a few questions and where you rate things on the Dawkins scale. For those who don't know, the Dawkins scale is a scale from 1 to 7. 1 means it's absolutely, completely true, totally true, 100%, and 7 means it's absolute, complete nonsense, total nonsense, 100%. So, Professor Chris French, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Ghosts.
6.
Alien visitation.
Yeah, 6.
Creationism.
7.
Dowsing.
All right, 6.9.
Dowsing.
Now, what do you mean by douse? I mean, this is one
mean-
of those interesting questions. Going to be people douse. Does it really work?
Does it really
Yeah.
work? In this case, does it work?
Yeah, no, 6.
The existence now of the Illuminati.
6. I'm glad you said now.
Yes. Well, I've got one more. The reptilian ruling class.
Oh, sod, it's 7.
Astrology.
I think I'm going to have to go for... No, okay, 6.9.
6.9 again.
Yeah.
Homeopathy. Controversial.
6.9.
The scientific method.
Woohoo! 1.
And finally, the big one. God.
Oh, 6.9.
Okay.
You've got to leave that room for doubt. I
You
think that
do.
is important.
You do.
But on some of them, then it does get a little bit tricky. I mean, and again, the thing about a notion like God is it even testable? You know,
Yes.
I mean, you can test the power of prayer, you can test other aspects, but the basic notion is unfalsifiable at the end of the day. It's, I personally am convinced by the kind of logical arguments against the existence of God. You know,
Yes.
how can we have free will if God is all knowing, and blah blah blah. The problem of evil, all that familiar stuff, is enough to convince me that God doesn't exist. But I might be wrong. Who knows? If I am, well, he'll no doubt get his revenge on me, because apparently he's that kind of a guy, isn't he?
Yes, apparently so. In some cultures. Okay, well, that's it for this week. If you want to suggest guests, ask any questions, or just make general comments, it's skepticalexperience with a K at gmail.com. And for this week, Professor Chris French, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next week.